Just being able to positively affect the world.
You have a mission to fulfill given by God.
It's not always about what other people want or what you want. It's kind of about what God wants.
If you are making a difference in whatever that it is, it has to reward others and yourself too.
Hey Village Youth, Sid Coop here. Hey, really excited to be with you. This is our session number 4. And as you know, we've been doing this series, Who We Are, answering like really significant questions like, do I matter? Do I belong? Does my life have purpose? And today we want to answer the question, can I make a difference? So, you know, my wife and I, we're into activity. We love adventure. We enjoy exercising. Exercising has become important to me, especially as I move to like older stages of life so I can, you know, like function, move, so keeping the body working, you know, and so we enjoy all these different kinds of things. Especially we do quite a bit of biking together, and I'm into running. And I'll be honest with you, I don't like love running, but I really love being finished running, right? So a number of years ago, a buddy comes to me and he's like, hey Sid, I know that you're into like running and you're into biking and I think that's pretty cool. And then he's like, what if we did a triathlon together? And I'm like, that's a terrible idea because a triathlon doesn't just include biking and running, it also includes swimming, and I can't swim. And this is a problem, right? Because when you run, you get tired, you can stop and rest, that's great. When you bike, you get tired, you can stop and rest, that's great. When you swim, you get tired, you stop, you die. That's not great. And so my friend's like, hey, that's no problem. He goes, I can't really swim either. I'm like, oh, that's so much better. We can have a funeral together. That's going to be awesome. So anyways, he kind of pushes in and I start thinking, well, you know what, doing a triathlon could be pretty cool. Like not everybody does that. And if I actually did it and did well, I could tell stories about it and people would think that's great. I could even maybe use it in a talk and all of a sudden be like, oh, look at me, I've done a triathlon. So then I'm like, let's do this. So we begin to train for it. We would get up in the mornings, we'd go for early morning runs. At noon when I had breaks, I'd go to the local pool, get some laps in, learning how to swim a bit. And then in the evenings, we'd get on the bike and spin it out on trainers in the winter, ride on the road in spring and summer. So we're training. And I remember when the triathlon finally comes. And first triathlon, really excited, a bunch of other athletes, and away we go. Start with the swim, survive the swim, that's awesome. Get on the bike actually goes pretty good because I'm okay at biking. Finish off with the run, you know, no problem. And in fact, placed pretty good. And I remember as I'm finishing the triathlon, I come across the starting line or the finish line, and I just start thinking to myself, man, I did this. This is amazing. And then I'm like, let's get a picture of this. We've got to post this. We need to let people know what I've done. Look how great this is. Look how great I am is really kind of the thought going through my head, right? And then 10 minutes later, I'm in the grass and I'm stretching. And all of a sudden, this thought starts running through my mind. It's like, hey, Sid, think about all the hours you put into biking, running, swimming over the last number of months. And then this question goes through my mind, Sid, what difference did it make? And not just like in what difference did it make to you, but like how many lives did you actually affect? Like, did this time actually make a difference? Like, did it actually change people's lives? Like for the better, did it make a difference? I remember just wrestling with that. Let me try to put context to this. So a bunch of years ago, I go with Compassion to Africa. And we go into what's called the Mathare Valley, one of the largest slums in the world. And I remember in the middle of the valley, there's this school where they're educating children and then feeding them as well. And it's lunchtime, and we're feeding the kids. And one of the workers comes to me, and there's this little boy. I'm not quite sure what his age was, but there's this little boy, and he's eating there. And she comes to me, and she goes, do you know the story of that young boy? I go, no. She goes, well, here's the deal. Both of his parents just passed away. I'm not sure why, or what happened, but they both just died. And he had a number of siblings. And now this young child had just become the head of his home. He was responsible. How silly would it have been for me to, I'll go to that boy and go, hey, let me help you. Did you know I ran a triathlon? How good is that? Like, that doesn't make a difference. That kid doesn't need to know if I've done a triathlon or made a team or got... What he needs me to serve him. He needs me to simply enter into the moment that he's in and meet his needs in the best way that I possibly can. And if I would move into that moment, this moment that God had created, and simply do what I could to love him in that space, that could be a game changer for him. You guys, this is like God's call on your life. He has actually designed you to make a difference. And the way that culture defines significance or making a difference is so different than the way the gospel calls us to. And that's what we want to talk about. So here's what I want you to do. Take a few minutes in your small groups, and we're going to have a conversation around what does it actually mean to make a difference. All right, so for our series, we've been looking at Ephesians 2, verse 10. Let's start at verse 8. We're going to read through again, and then we're going to do a bit of a deep dive here. Here's what it says. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not your own doing. It is the gift of God, not a result of works, so that no one may boast. And I think it's really important, you guys, just to acknowledge again, that the reason we have relationship with God through Jesus Christ is because of the work that he has done for us. It has nothing to do with what we've done. It's everything to do with what he's done. And we don't deserve it, but still in his love, he comes to us, right? And so that's grace, unmerited favor, don't deserve it, but he's given it to us, and he's given us a way to have relationship with God. Unbelievable. And then in light of that, here's what he says about how we should roll. Listen to what he says. He says, for we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. Okay, did you hear that? He says there's these good works that we've been created for in Christ Jesus. We talked about that last time. But then here's what he says. He says these good works God has prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. He's actually laid these out for us. So there's a couple of things that stand out to me. When I understand that God has gone before us and he's prepared the times and the spaces for us to do these good works he's called us to, the first thing that I'm thinking about is this, that there's no such thing as an unprepared moment. And here's what I mean by that. Hey, you're going to find yourselves in lots of situations that you're kind of going, okay, this might be a little complex for me. This might be too big for me. I'm not sure how to respond to this. It could be a situation where a friend presents a problem to you that maybe you've never had to deal with before. Or it could be a situation where you've been hurt and it's hard to know how to move forward or how to respond. Or it could be all sorts of different types of scenarios that you find yourself in with your friends or your parents, your families, or the groups that you're involved in. And you're just sitting there going, okay, I don't know how to respond. This is too big for me. But here's the reality. Those situations, God is not surprised by them. And he's actually prepared you for those moments. His word says he's prepared you for them. Somehow, in some way, he's given you a gift. He's reset your desires. He's given you an experience that maybe could relate or has prepared you to relate. But for sure, he's given you his power. We talked about that last time. He's actually prepared you for this moment. And the only thing that you need to do is go, okay, God, what is the right kingdom way forward? What is the way, Jesus, that you would have me simply take the next step? What kind of action, word, or attitude would actually reflect this idea that I love you and I love others? That's it, because that's what we're called to do. Love Jesus, love others in every situation. So what's the one thing I could do right now that would line up for that? And somehow we have to trust that God has actually prepared us to lean into this moment in a way that he would call us to do it. So it's complex, it's difficult, but all we need to do is just simply take that next step. That's the first thing. I think the second reality is not only is there no such thing as an unprepared moment, but there's no such thing as an insignificant moment. You guys, it doesn't matter where you are, who you're with, what's going on. Like, God has actually called you to this moment, right? And here's the deal. Only he knows where you can give him the most glory and do the greatest work for his kingdom. Only he knows that. So this is what you should be thinking. Every single time you walk into your school, every day, you need to know that God has called you to a time such as this. And you might not have something big to do, but whatever it is you do, God's calling you into that moment to do it for him in love for others. And that's the most significant thing you can do. So there's no such thing as an insignificant moment. I always think we talk a whole lot about, hey, you can change the world, you can change the world. And sometimes when we speak that way, what it tends to do for us is it makes it feel like we kind of put our lives on pause until we can get to this spot where we can actually change the world, when really the world that God is calling us to change is simply the world where we are right now. The person that's in front of us right now. The situation we find ourselves in right now. In the normal, everyday moments of our lives, that's the world that God is calling us to change in His way and in His timing. So 2 things this passage says to me. Number 1, there's no such thing as an unprepared moment. Number 2, there's no such thing as an insignificant moment. And then here's the third reality. He says, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. So how do we walk in them? So that idea of walking, which Paul uses over and over again, is just this idea of daily taking the steps God would have us take. And so then the question is, like, what do those steps actually look like? So in Mark chapter 10, Jesus' disciples are with him. And they're trying to figure out, how can their lives really count? Could they actually be really significant as these individuals and this kind of community together? And what they start doing is they're looking for an opportunity to kind of have this platform where everyone else can see how amazing and awesome they are. And so they ask Jesus for positions on his right and left in his kingdom. They're thinking he's setting up like a physical kingdom. They're going to have these great positions. And it's really interesting what Jesus says to them. Listen to what he says. In Mark 10:42, he says, and Jesus called them to him and said to them, you know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. For whoever would be great among you must be your servant. And whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. Okay, couple of things there. First of all, it's really interesting. The disciples want to be great. Jesus never chastises them for wanting to be great. He actually says, if you want to be great, this is what you need to do. He redefines what significance is, but he loves the idea that they want to be significant. Each and every one of us, you guys, we should want our lives to matter. That's a good thing. And for some of you, you've been told over and over again that your life can't matter. You have nothing to offer. And maybe your most significant step of faith will be trusting God when he says your life actually can matter. I've actually prepared and equipped you to matter. You just need to walk in it. That might be your greatest step of faith. So we all get to matter. The second thing that stands out to me here is this idea that serving others, like significance, isn't found in making much of ourselves. It's actually found in making much of Jesus and making much of others, right? It's found in actually us helping other people see how great Jesus is by radically serving them. That's actually what significance is looking for opportunities to just serve people. And here's what's fascinating. This isn't just something we do. Being a servant is who we are. He says we're to be servants. This is actually our identity, right? So like I remember when my son was really young, he started skateboarding. And he'd been at the skate park, and then he comes back and he's like, Dad, those kids at the skate park, they said like, I'm a great skateboarder. He's like, I'm a skateboarder, Dad. And I remember kneeling down in front of him and just saying, hey, son. He goes, yeah. I go, you're not actually a skateboarder. He's like, what? He's like, I got the skinny jeans. I got the shoes. Like, Dad, I'm a skateboarder. I'm like, no, son. Actually, who you are is you're a servant. Like, you're a follower of Jesus, and so you're a servant. This is who you are. Skateboarding is simply this place where you get to live out your identity as a servant. So I said to him, hey, kiddo, how could you be a servant skateboarding? He's like, well, I guess if someone fell, I could help them. I'm like, yeah. He goes, I guess if someone did something great, I could sell. I go, yes, you could celebrate them. That's awesome. This is who you are. You guys, serving, it's not just what we do. It's actually who we are. So then this changes the way we answer questions. When we walk into our school, or we're with our friends and we see someone with a need we can meet, the question is no longer, should I? The question is, how can I? Because this is who we are. So how can I, meet that need that's in front of me? And then when it comes to who should I, that's no longer the question either, because the Bible tells us that we serve as followers of Christ, not just our friends, those who have served us, not just those who are in need, but even our enemies he calls us to serve, even our enemies, you guys, those who are against us. Can you imagine if our community got really serious about serving, like, yes, our friends, serving, yes, those in needs, but even serving our enemies? What a difference that could make. Can you imagine being a community that's defined by stopping cycles of violence, cycles of anger and hate? Can you imagine if that's who we could be? This is who God's called us to be. When we are servants, this is simply what we do. This is us. So here's some of the questions I want you to talk about in your groups. What could it look like for you to actually live out your identity as a servant in the environments you're in? What could that look like? And what are some of the environments that you're in right now that God wants you to steward for his work in and through you? Let's break into our groups and let's spend some time talking about those questions. So I was working in a church for a number of years and loved it. And I was working there when my boys were small. And I remember this one evening we're setting up for youth group, right? So we're getting couches out and we'd get all sorts of different activities out, ping pong and foosball. And as I'm walking around, my two boys are following me. And again, they're pretty small at this time. Cole is like maybe kind of 4-ish. Peyton's probably like around 7. And I'm moving stuff around and Peyton starts helping me and he's like, Dad, watch me. I've got real muscles. And I'm like, yeah, you do. And he grabs this couch and he kind of moves the couch around. I'm like, you've got real good muscles, son. And then he's like, Dad, watch this. And he goes and grabs the foosball table and he kind of lifts it up a bit. I'm like, whoa, that's pretty impressive. I'm like, good job, buddy. He's like, you got really good muscles. Well, Cole is watching this, right? My younger son. And so then all of a sudden he kind of comes bounding up. He's like, hey, Dad. I'm like, what, buddy? He goes, I've got big muscles too. And I'm like, yeah, you do. Watch this, Dad. He kind of pushes the couch around a little bit. I'm like, that's great. And then he gets to the foosball table. He's like, Dad, watch this. And he grabs the foosball table and he goes to kind of lift it. And it just doesn't go anywhere, right? So then and I'm just standing there going, ugh. And then he looks over his shoulder at me and he goes, Dad, hey, Dad. I'm like, got you, kid. So I come over behind him. And I grab the foosball table with him, right? And we lift it up and put it down. He turns around and he goes, I've got big muscles. I'm like, yeah, so big, so big. I think when it comes to like making our lives count, like making a difference, when it comes to, can I make a difference? I think we often think that the responsibility of making a difference needs to be done on our power. But over and over again through the scriptures, the gospel tells us that we don't do anything on our power. If we really want to make a difference, we do it in his power. I mean, listen to what Jesus says to his disciples at the end of the passage in Mark chapter 10. Here's what he says in verse 45. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and give his life as a ransom for many. Did you hear that? Like in one sense, Jesus actually didn't come to be served. We don't serve Jesus by providing for him something that he needs or doesn't have. He's God. He doesn't need anything. We serve him by doing his work for others, right? But here's the other reality, that before we can even do his work for others, we actually need him to serve us in this sense, that he empowers us. He enables us to do the work that we can't do on ourselves, on our own strength. And so, here's the deal, you guys. There are so many things that are against us that can keep us from being able to do great stuff. You know what I mean? Like I might have enemies against me. I might have lack of knowledge or wisdom against me. I might be against myself. The things I know I should do, I don't want to do. So many things that can be against me that keep me from being able to do what I think I should do. But because of who God is, he's the king of the universe. And we already spoke about the reality that he rose from the dead, right? Like the power that raised God from the dead, that raised Jesus from the dead, is the same power at work in you to do the work that he's calling us to do. There is nothing that can keep God from doing his purposes. And that type of power is at work in you because he wants to do his purposes through you. So yes, your life can make a difference, man. And it's not about changing the world. It's about being engaged in the world where God has placed you right now, with the people that he has placed right in front of you, with the activities that you are involved in right now. You should be involved in sports. You should be involved in school. You should be engaged with your family. And you should be there missionally, knowing that God's placed you there for a time such as this to make a difference, not on your strength, but on his strength. And when we begin to kind of realize that, when we kind of own this idea that maybe where I am right now, God has a plan for me, a way for me, and we begin to just walk into that space, simply take the next step by his power, in his way, for his glory, for the good of others, when we do that, you guys, our lives matter. When we do that, our lives make an eternal difference. And that doesn't just change the people around us, it changes us. Because in that space, we actually get to experience the presence of Jesus Christ, the reality of the gospel in us. And man, our lives are just never the same after that kind of stuff takes place. So God bless you as you go into the work that God has called you to in the space you are right now with the people He's placed in your path right here. Your life can make a difference. This is who you are.